The Festival of Eternal Light began at dawn with the royal family gathered in the grand sanctuary. Surrounded by thousands of worshippers who had traveled from across the queendom to witness the sacred ceremony, Taiho stood 3 steps behind Princess Serafini, his eyes never resting, his body coiled with tension that he hid beneath a mask of professional calm. The attack came at midday when the 3 suns aligned perfectly overhead. Explosions rocked the outer walls of the palace. Complex armed soldiers wearing the colors of 4 different noble houses poured through breaches that should have been impossible to create the queens. Loyal guards moved to intercept but found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered by enemies who knew every defensive position and every weakness in the palace security. Lord Serenthi appeared on the steps of the grand sanctuary with 200 warriors at his back, his ceremonial robes replaced by armor that gleamed with deadly purpose. Queen Valithris, he called out in a voice that carried across the panicked crowd. Your reign of stagnation ends today. Surrender the throne peacefully, and you will be allowed to live out your remaining years in comfortable exile. The queen rose from her sacred seat with dignity that defied the chaos surrounding her. You would commit sacrilege on the holiest day of our calendar, she said coldly. You would spill blood in the sanctuary, where our ancestors first pledged their eternal oaths. I would do whatever is necessary to preserve our way of life. Serenthi replied. Your daughter means to destroy everything we have built. She speaks of opening our borders and sharing our secrets with lesser species. She would reduce us to just another civilization among many, rather than the rightful rulers of this galaxy. And you think murder will solve this? I think succession will solve this, Serenthi said with a thin smile. When you and your daughter are gone, the council will choose a new ruler, one who understands the importance of tradition. Taiho calculated distances and angles with the part of his mind that never stopped, thinking about combat, 200 warriors between them, and the exit, more fighting in the corridors beyond. The queen's loyal forces were responding, but they would not arrive in time. He would have to create time. Seraphine, he said quietly, without turning his head. When I move, you run toward the eastern passage. Your mother's guards should be breaking through there within 2 minutes. I will not leave you to face them alone. That is not a request. Your Highness. He moved before she could argue. The first rebel warrior died without understanding what had happened. Taiho's blade finding the gap in his armor before his brain could register the threat. The second and third fell on the same heartbeat, victims of a killing efficiency that the Valorians had never seen from a human before. Taiho fought like nothing they had ever encountered. He did not move with the elegant grace of their ancient combat forms. He moved with the brutal practicality of a species that had clawed its way sapience on a world that tried to kill them every single day. He took wounds that should have stopped him and kept fighting. He broke bones that should have ended his mobility and adapted his technique to compensate. He bled from a dozen cuts and never slowed down. Lord Serenthi watched with growing horror as his warriors fell before this impossible human, this creature from a primitive backwater world who refused to acknowledge the superiority of beings who had been perfecting warfare for 1,000,000 years. Kill him, Serenthi screamed. All of you, kill him now. The warriors swarmed Taiho from every direction. He could not defeat them all. He knew this with the cold certainty of someone who had calculated the odds 1,000 times, but he did not need to defeat them all. He only needed to hold them long enough for Seraphine to escape. He only needed to buy time. A blade pierced his shoulder from behind. Another sliced across his thigh. He felt his body beginning to fail, felt the accumulated damage pushing him toward a darkness that waited with patient hunger. But he kept fighting. The sounds of battle from the eastern passage changed. New voices joined the chaos. shouting orders in the formal cadence of the Queen's elite guard reinforcements had arrived. Taiho allowed himself a moment of relief before a blow to his head sent him crashing to the ground. Lord Sorrenti stood over him, with a blade pressed against his throat, using the wounded human as a shield against the approaching guards. "Stay back," Sorrenti commanded, "or I will kill him." "You will kill him anyway." The Queen's voice rang out across the sanctuary, cold and certain as winter, "and then my guards will kill you, and your rebellion will end in the same ignominy that awaits all traitors. At least I will have the satisfaction of ending this creature who has ruined everything." Sorrenti raised his blade for the killing stroke. Seraphine's voice cut through the air like light through darkness. "Mother." Now, something happened that Taiho could not see. A flash of energy, a sound like reality itself being torn apart when his vision cleared. Lord Sorrenti lay motionless on the ground, with smoke rising from his chest. The Queen stood with one hand extended, power crackling around her fingers in colors that human eyes were not designed to perceive. "The penalty for treason," she said quietly, "has always been death." The remaining rebels threw down their weapons without their leader, without hope of success. They had no reason to continue fighting. The Queen's guards swept through the sanctuary, securing prisoners while healers rushed to tend the wounded. Taiho felt himself being lifted by gentle hands, heard voices speaking in urgent tones about damage and survival and impossible resilience. He did not know how long he drifted in darkness when he woke again. He was in a familiar room, the same healing chamber where his journey on Ethera had begun. But this time, the Queen herself sat beside his bed. "You fought like a demon from the old stories," she said without preamble. "My warriors are still talking about it. They say you killed 17 of Sorrenti's best soldiers before they brought you down." 18. Taiho corrected weakly. The Queen almost smiled. "The conspiracy is broken," she continued. "The other council members have been arrested. The noble houses that supported them are pledging loyalty so frantically that I can barely keep track of all the groveling. And Seraphine, my daughter, is unharmed. Thanks to you." Taiho closed his eyes and let out a breath he felt like he had been holding for months. "I made you a promise," the Queen said. "You have earned your freedom, Commander Yoon. A ship waits to take you back to Earth whenever you are ready to travel." He should have felt joy at those words. Instead, he felt something more complicated, something that tangled around his heart in ways he did not fully understand. "I need to go back," he said slowly. "I need to reclaim the choice that was taken from me. I understand, but I will return." The Queen studied him with those ancient eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. "Will you?" "Yes," Taiho said, and he was surprised by how certain he sounded. "There's something here worth coming back for." The Queen rose from her chair and moved toward the door. She paused with her hand on the frame. "My daughter will be pleased to hear that," she said, though I suspect she already knows. Seraphine came to see him before he left. She stood in the doorway of his chamber, beautiful and terrible in equal measure, the princess who would one day be queen. "You could stay," she said. "I could," he agreed. "But I need to leave first. I need to choose this freely, not because I was kept here against my will. And if you change your mind once you are home, if Earth feels like where you belong." Taiho crossed the room to stand before her, close enough to see the stars reflected in her ocean-deep eyes. "I spent my whole life following orders," he said, "protecting people because it was my job, going where I was told without asking why. You are the first thing I have ever chosen for myself." He reached out and took her hand, feeling the strange warmth of her alien skin against his calloused fingers. "I will come back," he promised. "Not because of duty or debt or honor. I will come back because there is nowhere else in this galaxy I would rather be." Seraphine smiled, and there was something fierce and joyful and hopeful in her expression. "Then go home." Commander Yoon, remember where you came from. And when you are ready, come back to where you belong. He boarded the ship an hour later. Standing at the viewport as Ethera grew smaller in the distance, Earth waited ahead. Familiar and strange at the same time, but his heart remained behind. In a palace of crystal and light, with a princess who had shown him that even a simple soldier could choose his own destiny. He would return. The galaxy had never seen a human make such a promise and fail to keep it, and Commander Yoon Taeho had no intention of being the first. The weeks that followed were the most dangerous of Taeho's life. He moved through the Valorian court like a ghost, using his status as a mere human to go places that important people never watched. Servants talked freely in front of him. Guards ignored his presence, and the conspirators never thought to check if the princess's pet, Deathworlder, might actually be hunting them. He gathered evidence with the patience of a predator, stalking prey that did not know it was being watched. Financial records that showed money flowing to the Preservation Council from sources outside the Queendom. Communications that revealed the depth of the conspiracy and the names of everyone involved. Plans that detailed exactly how they intended to remove not just Seraphine, but eventually the Queen herself. The external connection troubled him most. Someone was funding the conspiracy. Someone with resources that exceeded anything a single noble house could provide. The money came through channels so complex that tracing it to its source would take years. But Taeho did not need to know the ultimate source. He only needed to know enough to make the conspirators panic. The Queen summoned him unexpectedly one evening, calling him away from a state function where he had been quietly observing Lord Sorrenti's movements. She received him in her private chambers rather than the formal throne room, a space far smaller and more intimate than he had expected. "My daughter trusts you," the Queen said without greeting or ceremony. "She shares things with you that she has never shared with anyone else, including her own mother. Princess Seraphine honors me with her confidence. She tells me nothing." The Queen continued as if he had not spoken. "She keeps secrets and makes plans and thinks I do not notice. But I have ruled this queendom for 12,000 years. Commander Yoon, I notice everything." Taeho remained silent, uncertain where this was heading. "I know there is a conspiracy against my house," the Queen said, and her ancient eyes held knowledge that stretched back further than human history. "I have known for longer than you have been alive. I know the names of every traitor on my council and every noble house that supports them." "Then, why haven't you acted?" "Because acting would destroy everything I have built," the Queen replied. "The balance of power in this queendom is delicate beyond your comprehension. I cannot remove my enemies without giving their allies cause to rebel. I cannot protect my daughter without revealing how much I know." She rose from her chair and moved to the window that looked out over the endless gardens below. "That is why I kept you here," she said quietly. "That is why I placed you beside Seraphine and gave you the freedom to investigate what my own agents could not touch." Taeho felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You planned this from the beginning." "I saw an opportunity," the Queen corrected. "A human who acted without calculation, who moved on instinct rather than political consideration, who could go places my people could not, because nobody expected a human to be dangerous. I could have been killed." "Yes," the Queen agreed without apology. "But you were not. You survived, and you learned, and you have gathered evidence that even my most loyal followers could never have obtained." She turned to face him, and for the first time, Taeho saw something like respect in her expression. "Now I need to know what you have found." Taeho considered his options carefully. The Queen had been manipulating him from the start, using him as a tool without his knowledge or consent. But she was also Seraphine's mother, and whatever game she played, she clearly wanted to protect her daughter. He told her everything. He laid out the evidence he had gathered, the names of the conspirators, the external funding, the plans they had made to seize power. The Queen listened without interruption, her face giving nothing away. When he finished, she was silent for a long moment. "You have done well," she finally said. "Better than I had any right to expect from a species as young as yours. What will you do with this information?" "Nothing," the Queen said, and Taiho's confusion must have shown on his face because she smiled slightly. "I will do nothing, but you will do something for me. What do you need?" "I need you to let the conspirators discover that they have been exposed," the Queen said. "I need you to make them believe that their only option is immediate action before the evidence can be used against them. You want them to start a coup." "I want them to reveal themselves," the Queen corrected. "I want them to gather their forces and make their move while I am prepared to respond. A coup that fails is not a civil war. It is a purge of traitors that no one can question." Taiho understood the terrible logic of her plan. If the conspirators acted openly, they would be rebels rather than accused nobles. Their allies would distance themselves rather than be caught in the same net. The Queen could eliminate her enemies without giving the other houses reason to fear they might be. "Next, what about Seraphine? My daughter will be protected," the Queen said. "By you, Commander Yoon. That is your only concern. Keep her alive through whatever comes next, and I will give you anything you desire." "I want to go home." The Queen's expression did not change. "If you succeed, you will have your freedom. I give you my word as Queen of the Valorian Eternal Throne." Taiho spent the next week carefully letting information slip to the wrong ears. He allowed himself to be seen in places where conspirators gathered. He spoke too loudly about evidence that pointed to noble houses and council members. He made himself visible in ways that suggested he was close to exposing everything. Lord Sorrenti's household staff reported unusual activity. Within 3 days, emergency meetings were called between the council members who had aligned against the throne money. Moved quickly through accounts that had been dormant for years. The conspirators were preparing to act. Seraphine found him in his chambers on the night before the Festival of Eternal Light, the holiest day in the Valorian calendar, when the royal family would be most vulnerable. "You spoke with my mother," she said, and there was accusation in her voice. "She summoned me. She told you to trigger the coup." Taiho did not deny it. "Your mother sees further than either of us," he said. "She has been playing this game for 12,000 years. She knows how to win. And if she is wrong, then I will do what I have always done," Taiho said simply. "I will stand between you and whatever tries to hurt you, and I will not stop fighting until one of us is dead." Seraphine's anger faded into something softer. "You could have escaped," she said. "During your investigation, you found a dozen ways out of the palace. Routes that nobody was watching. You could have run back to Earth and left all of this behind." "I know. Why didn't you?" Taiho thought about the question seriously before answering. "Because running would have meant leaving you to face this alone," he said. "And I made a choice the day I saved your life. I chose to protect you. I did not understand what that choice meant at the time, but I understand it now. You are not bound by the life debt," Seraphine said quietly. "That is a Valorian tradition, not a human one." "No," Taiho agreed. "I am bound by something stronger." He did not name what that something was. Neither did she. But in the silence that followed, something passed between them that needed no words to express. Tomorrow the conspirators would make their move. Tomorrow blood would be spilled in the crystal halls of the palace. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of his chambers, Taiho allowed himself to believe that whatever came next, he would not face it alone, and neither would she. The months that followed his appointment taught Taiho more about the Valorian way of life than any diplomatic briefing could have prepared him for. He trained with the palace guards in their ancient combat forms, learning to move with the fluid grace that came naturally to beings who had been perfecting warfare for 1,000,000 years. He ate their strange foods that tasted like music translated into flavor. He wore their elegant clothes that made him feel like a child playing. Dress up in a giant's wardrobe, and he watched Princess Seraphine grow from a sheltered royal into something far more dangerous. She was not what he had expected. The first impression of delicate beauty had hidden a mind as sharp as any blade. A will as strong as the crystal spires that defined her homeland. Seraphine had plans for her future reign that would reshape the entire queendom. Plans that powerful people desperately wanted to stop. My mother rules through tradition, Seraphine explained one night as they walked the moonlit gardens after a particularly tedious state dinner. She maintains balance by never changing anything, by letting the noble houses believe they have real power while she holds all the true strings. That sounds effective, Taiho said. It is stagnation dressed in pretty clothes, Seraphine replied sharply. Our civilization has not advanced in 10,000 years, because advancement means change, and change means risk. The noble houses prefer comfort over progress. She stopped beside a fountain that seemed to flow upward rather than down, water defying gravity through some technology or magic that Taiho did not understand. I want to open our borders, she said quietly. I want to share our knowledge with younger species, instead of hoarding it like jealous misers. I want to make alliances based on partnership rather than domination. That would threaten a lot of established interests. Yes, Seraphine agreed. Which is why someone keeps trying to kill me. The second assassination attempt came 3 months into Taiho's service, disguised as a gift of rare wine from a minor noble house. He got it only because he had learned to examine everything that came near the princess, testing foods and drinks with the small device the queen had provided for exactly this purpose. The poison would have been undetectable by Valorian standards. It was designed specifically to kill members of the royal bloodline while appearing to be natural heart failure. Taiho traced the gift back through 6 different intermediaries to a noble house called the Sorrenti, one of the oldest and most respected families in the entire queendom. Lord Verento Sorrenti sat on the queen's own council. He had been a trusted advisor for longer than Earth had possessed writing, and he was trying to murder the heir to the throne. We cannot accuse him directly, Seraphine said when Taiho brought her the evidence. My mother would have to investigate, and that investigation would reveal how much we already know about the conspiracy. So we let him keep trying until he succeeds. No, Seraphine said, and her eyes held that calculating look he had come to recognize. We find out who else is involved, we map the entire network, and then we remove them all at once. Taiho understood the wisdom of her approach, even if it made his protective instincts scream in protest. Taking down one conspirator would only drive the others deeper into hiding, but catching them all required patience and evidence and time that might run out at any moment. He began his investigation in the shadows of the Valorian court, moving through spaces that important people never noticed. The servants gossiped about everything. The guards talked freely in front of the human they had learned to ignore. The minor nobles who visited Lord Sorrenti's estate discussed their plans in voices loud enough for a patient listener to hear. What Taiho discovered chilled him to his bones. The conspiracy extended far beyond a single noble house. At least 7 members of the Queen's Council were involved, along with military commanders and trade guild leaders and even some of the palace staff. They called themselves the Preservation Council, and they believed that Seraphine's ideas would destroy the Valorian way of life. But the truly frightening part was the external connection. The Preservation Council was receiving support from outside the queendom, from a power that Taiho could not identify, but whose influence reached across multiple star systems. Someone wanted the Valorian throne to remain exactly as it was. Someone was willing to kill to prevent change. The Palace guards began to respect Taiho during this time. Though respect came slowly and grudgingly to beings who had spent millions of years looking down on younger species, he earned their regard not through combat skill, where they would always exceed him, but through endurance that shocked them. Humans were deathworlders, born on a planet of crushing gravity and poisonous atmosphere and extremes that would kill most galactic species in minutes. Taiho could train for hours past the point where Valorian muscles failed from exhaustion. He could take hits that would have hospitalized their strongest warriors and keep fighting through pain that registered as impossible on their medical scanners. He could survive things they could not even imagine. "You are broken," the guard captain told him one day, using the word as a compliment rather than an insult. "Your body does not know when to stop. We call it stubbornness." Taiho replied. The captain laughed, a sound like crystal chimes ringing in a storm. "I think I'm beginning to understand why the Queen wanted you here." Seraphine found him in the training yard that evening, watching him practice forms that blended human combat styles with Valorian techniques into something neither elegant nor graceful, but devastatingly effective. "I know who ordered the original assassination," she said without preamble. Taiho stopped mid-movement. "Tell me." "It was sanctioned by the inner circle of the Preservation Council," Seraphine said, "but the order came from someone on my mother's own council. Someone she trusts absolutely. Someone who has been whispering poison in her ear for centuries. Lord Serenthi." "Yes, but not him alone." Seraphine's voice dropped even lower. "3 others stand with him. 3 members of the council who meet in secret to decide how best to maintain the old ways. Then we take this to the Queen." "We cannot," Seraphine said, and there was pain in her eyes now. Real pain. "If we accuse them openly, they will call for a formal inquiry. The evidence will be contested for years, while they have time to hide their tracks and prepare. And even if we eventually prove their guilt, the damage will be done." "What damage?" "Civil war," Seraphine whispered. "The noble houses will be forced to choose sides. Those loyal to tradition against those willing to embrace change. The queendom will tear itself apart, and everything my mother has maintained for 10,000 years will collapse into chaos." Taiho understood the impossible position she faced. Moving forward meant destruction. Standing still meant death, but there had to be another way. There always was. "Then we don't accuse them," he said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "We don't give them time to prepare or hide or rally support. What do we do instead?" Taiho looked at the princess, who had become something more than his duty over these long months. "We make them move first," he said. "We make them so afraid of exposure that they act before they're ready. And when they do, we'll be waiting." Seraphine smiled, and there was something fierce in her expression that reminded him of her mother. "I knew I saved the right human." The crystalline spires of the Valorian palace caught the light of 3 distant suns and scattered rainbows across the grand ceremony hall where 12 species had gathered for the summit of eternal accord. Commander Yun Taiho stood at the back of the human delegation, his dress uniform feeling tight against his shoulders as he scanned the crowd with practiced eyes that never stopped moving. He was nobody important here. The human ambassador had brought him as a formality, a single security officer to make their small delegation look slightly more official among the towering Valorians and the multi-limbed Cathari and the floating Luminex who drifted through the air like living clouds. The Valorians stood nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that shimmered like polished pearl and eyes that held the depth of ancient oceans. Their queen, Valithris, sat upon a throne carved from a single massive gemstone, her presence commanding the attention of every being in the hall. Beside her stood Princess Seraphine, younger and softer in her features, but carrying the same regal bearing that made lesser beings feel small. Taiho had read the briefing files 3 times before arriving. The Valorians considered themselves the eldest children of the galaxy, the first to achieve civilization. The natural rulers of all they surveyed humans were newcomers, barely worth acknowledging, useful only for their strange persistence and their willingness to take jobs that other species found beneath them. That was why Taiho stood at the back while the real diplomats exchanged elaborate greetings at the front of the hall. The ceremony droned on in the musical language of the Valorians, translated through the small device pressed against Taiho's ear into flat and emotionless words that stripped away all the beauty of the original speech. He watched the servants moving along the edges of the hall, carrying trays of refreshments that glowed with soft internal light. He watched the guards standing at attention by each doorway, their ceremonial spears more decorative than practical. He watched the shadows between the massive pillars that held up the vaulted ceiling. Something felt wrong. Taiho could not explain it to anyone who asked, could not point to a specific detail that justified the cold sensation spreading through his gut. 20 years of military service had taught him to trust that feeling, even when logic failed to support it. 2 of the servants were moving differently than the others. Their steps were too precise, too measured, lacking the natural variation that came from genuine service. They were heading toward the raised platform where the royal family sat. Taiho pushed away from the wall and began moving through the crowd, earning irritated glances from the alien dignitaries he brushed past. The servants reached into their robes. Taiho saw the gleam of blades and his body moved. Before his mind could form a conscious thought, he vaulted over the head of a startled Cathari diplomat and landed on the platform just as the first assassin raised his weapon toward Princess Seraphine. Taiho caught the attacker's wrist and twisted hard, feeling bones crack beneath his grip as he wrenched the blade free and drove his elbow into the assassin's throat. The second attacker lunged at him from the side. Taiho spun, using the first assassin's body as a shield, and felt the blade meant for the princess slice across his ribs instead. Pain exploded through his side, but he kept moving, kept fighting, because stopping meant dying and dying meant failing. He grabbed the second assassin by the face and slammed their head into the gemstone floor with enough force to end the threat permanently. The hall erupted into chaos. Screams echoed off the crystal walls as dignitaries fled in all directions, while guards rushed toward the platform with weapons drawn. Taiho stood over the fallen attackers, blood running down his side and dripping onto the pristine floor, his chest heaving as he fought to stay upright. Princess Seraphine stared at him with those deep ocean eyes, her face pale with shock, her body frozen in the spot where she would have died if he had been even 1 second slower. The assassins' bodies began to shimmer and change, their features melting away to reveal something else entirely beneath the stolen faces. Shapeshifters, the myriad, a species known for their ability to assume any form, banned from diplomatic functions for exactly this reason. Someone had smuggled them and someone had wanted the princess dead badly enough to risk an interstellar incident. Taiho's vision began to blur. At the edges, he had lost more blood than he realized, and his legs felt like they belonged to someone else. He dropped to one knee, still keeping himself between the princess and any other potential threats, still doing his job, even as his body started to fail him. The crowd parted like water before a great ship, and Queen Valithris descended from her throne with terrible grace. She moved to her daughter's side and touched Seraphine's face with gentle hands, checking for injuries that did not exist because a human had chosen to bleed in her place. Then the queen turned her ancient eyes upon Taiho. He expected gratitude. He expected, perhaps, a reward or at least a formal acknowledgement of his service. Instead, he saw something cold and calculating moving behind those beautiful features. a mind working through possibilities that he could not begin to understand. This human will remain on Ethora until the matter is fully resolved, the queen declared in a voice that carried to every corner of the hall. The human ambassador pushed forward through the crowd, his face red with exertion and confusion. Your Majesty, Commander Yoon is under Earth's jurisdiction, and we really must insist. Your insistence is noted, the queen said without looking at him, her eyes never leaving Taiho's face. And dismissed. Guards surrounded Taiho before he could speak, though he doubted he had the strength for words anyway. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Princess Seraphine's face hovering above him, her lips moving in words he could not hear, her eyes filled with an emotion he could not name. He had saved her life. Now it seemed his own life belonged to her mother. The queen had spoken, and in the Valorian queendom her word was absolute law. Taiho closed his eyes and let the darkness take him, hoping that when he woke he would find this had all been a strange dream brought on by too much recycled air and not enough sleep. But he knew better. He knew that his simple life as a security officer had ended the moment he chose to act. He knew that the galaxy had just become a much more complicated place, and he knew, with a certainty that settled into his bones like ice, that going home had just become the hardest mission of his entire career. Taiho woke to the soft hum of medical technology he did not recognize and the gentle glow of bioluminescent plants that lined the walls of his recovery chamber. 3 weeks had passed since the assassination attempt, though he only learned this later. The Valorian healers had kept him sedated while their advanced medicine repaired damage that would have killed him twice over on Earth. His room was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache. Crystal windows looked out over gardens that seemed to stretch forever, filled with flowers and colors that human eyes had never evolved to properly appreciate. The bed beneath him molded perfectly to his body. The air carried scents of something sweet and calming that made his mind feel slow and peaceful. It was the most luxurious prison cell in the entire galaxy. Taiho discovered the truth of his situation on the first day he could walk without assistance. The door to his chamber opened freely enough, revealing a hallway of polished stone and living light, but every path he tried led to a dead end or a locked passage or a politely apologetic guard who explained that certain areas were restricted. For security purposes, he could wander the healing wing and its attached gardens. He could not leave the palace complex. He could not contact Earth directly. He could not do anything except heal and wait and wonder what the queen intended for him. The human ambassador came to see him once during those early days. A brief and uncomfortable meeting conducted under the watchful eyes of Valorian attendants. We're working on getting you home, the ambassador said in a voice that carried no conviction. The queen has invoked something called a life debt protocol, and our diplomatic corps is trying to understand exactly what that means. Taiho understood what it meant. It meant he was property now, bound by a tradition older than human civilization to the person whose life he had saved. The Valorians did not see this as imprisonment. They saw it as honor. Princess Seraphine visited him on the 5th day of his conscious recovery. She came without guards or attendants, slipping through his door like a shadow made of starlight, her silver hair cascading over shoulders that seemed too delicate to carry the weight of a crown. You are Commander Yoon Taiho, she said, and her voice carried the same musical quality as her mother's, but softer somehow, younger, touched with something that might have been curiosity or perhaps guilt. I am Princess Seraphine of the Eternal House, and I owe you my existence. Taiho rose from his chair, and offered a bow that probably broke 17 different protocols of Valorian etiquette. "Your Highness should not feel indebted," he said, carefully. "I acted on instinct, nothing more. Any soldier would have done the same." "No," Seraphine said. And she moved closer to study him with those ocean-deep eyes. "They would not have." I watched the recordings afterward, and do you know what I saw? He shook his head. "I saw every guard in that hall freeze when the assassins revealed themselves. I saw dignitaries from 12 species scramble for their own survival. I saw my mother's elite protectors hesitate for 2 full seconds before moving. 2 seconds that would have seen me dead." She reached out and touched the place on his uniform where the blade had cut him, where new scar tissue now marked his flesh. "Only you moved," she said quietly. "Only the human nobody was watching. Only the security officer standing at the back of the room. You moved before anyone else could think, and you bled for someone you had never met. It's my job," Taiho said, though the words felt hollow even to him. "Your job is to protect your own people," Seraphine corrected. "Your ambassador was standing much closer to you than I was. You chose to save me when logic dictated you should have protected him." She was right. He had not thought about it in the moment, but she was absolutely right. The ambassador had been his responsibility, and Taiho had abandoned that duty to save a stranger. Why had he done that? He did not know the answer. Seraphine visited again the next day. And the day after that, she brought him books, written in languages he could not read, and then sat beside him to translate the passages she found most interesting. She asked him questions about Earth that no one had ever bothered to ask before. Questions about human music and human food and the strange human habit of keeping animals as companions rather than tools. In return, Taiho asked her about Valorian culture and learned things the diplomatic briefings had never mentioned. He learned that the life debt was not merely tradition, but something the Valorians felt in their very blood. A bond that transcended simple gratitude. He learned that Seraphine had been marked for death by someone powerful enough to smuggle shapeshifters through the tightest security in the known galaxy. He learned that the Queen kept him close not out of cruelty, but out of calculation. "My mother sees value in you," Seraphine explained one evening as they walked through the healing gardens together. "She believes you can be useful in ways that her own people cannot. I'm just a soldier." Taiho said, "You are human," Seraphine replied. "And humans are becoming very valuable in this part of the galaxy. Your species has something that others lack. Something that the older races have bred out of themselves over millions of years of civilization." "What's that?" She stopped walking and turned to face him, her expression serious in a way he had not seen before. "Chaos," she said. "Beautiful, terrible, unpredictable chaos. You do not follow the patterns that everyone else follows. You make choices that logic cannot predict. You saved my life because something inside you demanded action when every rational calculation said you should have stayed safe." The Queen summoned him to a private audience 3 days later. She received him in a chamber of black crystal that absorbed light rather than reflecting it, making the space feel infinite and intimate at the same time. "I have an offer for you, Commander Yoon," the Queen said, and her voice echoed strangely in that dark room. "I am prepared to grant you the title of Royal Guardian, personal protector to Princess Seraphine, with all the honors and privileges that title carries." Taiho felt his heart sink. "And if I refuse, then you will remain here as a guest until circumstances change," the Queen said. "But you will be a guest without purpose, without direction, without anything to do except wait for a freedom that may never come." "That sounds like punishment for refusing." "It sounds like reality," the Queen corrected. "I cannot force you to serve, but I can remind you that service is better than stagnation. You have skills that are wasting away in that comfortable room." Skills that my daughter will need in the months ahead. She leaned forward. And for just a moment, Taiho saw something behind her composed mask. Fear. The Queen of the Valorians was afraid of something. There are those who want Seraphine dead, she said quietly. And I cannot protect her without revealing how much I already know. I need someone outside the normal channels, someone nobody expects. Someone human. Taiho understood then that he had no real choice at all. He could accept the position and serve with purpose. Or he could rot in luxury while the princess faced threats he might have stopped. I'll do it, he said. The queen smiled. And there was no warmth in it. I thought you might.